So next, I'm going to give us a little history lesson on China tech innovation. I've been covering this field for about 20 years as a journalist and a book author. And so I thought I'd just take you quickly through some of the evolution of China's tech and how it's evolved over the past 20 years. So the subtitle of my first book was How China is Winning the Tech Race. That really got a lot of pushback, particularly from Silicon Valley when that first book came out, which was 2008. And there were only some of the real thought leaders in the Valley who were actually almost agreeing with the premise. So Jerry Yang, it will be one more decade before China rivals the West for tech leadership. David Chow, a very well-known venture capitalist from DCM in the Valley. The next Steve Jobs will come from China. Edward Tian, CEO of China Netcom. The internet for China is like the locomotive was for the US. Of course, now I think it's the mobile internet. It's no longer web, it's just surpassed the PC directly into the mobile. So this is a little bit of the factors that have led up to China's Silicon Valley. Obviously the growth of China, the large number of mobile phone and web users, the engineering talent, the top websites globally, the government is pushing technology innovation, and of course there's the entrepreneurial culture, which is very much aligned with Israel in this case too. I think there's a lot of similarities between Israel and China and the tech innovation that we're seeing in the whole entrepreneurial culture and the negotiating style. I think this is one of the reasons we're seeing so much deal making between China and Israel. This will give you an idea of where digital China has evolved. It has the world's largest number of smartphones, the world's largest smartphone users, the world's largest number of internet users, and how many people here are using WeChat? Almost everybody, because you're all doing business with China. WeChat now has more than 700 million users, and we're on there as well, Silicon Dragon and myself, Rebecca Fannin. So as we're watching this evolution of China tech, you can see the pattern of global patent filings. China has really risen in the past few years. It was ranked 7th in the world for patents in force in 2008. It's now ranked 3rd after the US and China. You can see the growth curve there as well in terms of patent filing increases. China last year was almost 17% increase in patent filings. The US was a little bit of a slide down. Japan was an increase. And Israel, as you can see, was a pretty good increase as well. So these are kind of what I call the tech triangle of US, China, Israel, where a lot of the tech innovation is centered. So back then, in around 2005, when I started writing really seriously about China tech and venture, I told you about that pushback from Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley. So a lot of them told me, we're not going to, and this quote actually comes from Don Valentine from Sequoia, we will not be investing in China. It's too far and it's too foreign. That was really the view from Silicon Valley. But you can see that that really changed over the years. So last year, China venture capital was $32 billion. And China now ranks as the 2nd largest venture capital market in the world after the US. So some of these tech hotspots that developed in China, a lot of you know that, a lot of you I'm sure recognize this. This is right at Tuss Park, right outside Tsinghua University in Beijing. This was a base for venture capitalists getting started in China from Silicon Valley and elsewhere. And what they were doing is they were funding things that they felt really comfortable with, like copycat versions of China's, of Facebook, of Amazon, of MySpace. So they were really risk averse, and they were really only funding the sea turtles, those who were educated and trained in the West. So that was in their comfort zone back then. But things evolved really quickly. I mean, Alibaba was one of the ones that was founded by Sand Hill Road investors, Baidu as well. Many of these went on to become household names. Gary Wang, who was the founder of Tudou, which merged with Youku. And Gary is now doing Hollywood deals. Peggy Yuyu, the Amazon of China, a wonderful female entrepreneur, also funded by Silicon Valley. Renren. Renren's had a kind of a roller coaster. They've now become an investor themselves, an investment holding company But they were originally the Facebook of China, and they were funded, again, by Silicon Valley. And these venture capitalists who were coming into China were people like Neil Shen from Sequoia Capital China. They were racing around doing deals so fast you could not believe it, because back then it was a wide open market, valuations were low, and anything went practically. So a number of things have changed since then. Instead of just the copycats, there's a lot of innovators coming out of China today. And they're coming in biotech and clean tech and virtual reality and artificial intelligence and fintech, and it's all in hyperspeed motion. In fact, Silicon Valley looks really slow in comparison to what's happening in China. So these entrepreneurs today are coming up with cutting-edge advances. Some of the earlier ones, this is a fintech entrepreneur, Oriental Wisdom. Pingko came up with a Skype version before Skype really took off. He's a Tsinghua graduate. Maxon is an internet browser that Google invested in, and Internet Explorer's adopted some of their ideas. Lattice Power, which is a LED manufacturer, and I remember the venture capitalists telling me that they were going to be a billions-dollar IPO. That didn't exactly happen, but they do have a lot of patents, and I've met the founder and the scientist behind it, the physicist behind it, at their China location. So today we're seeing a whole new group of innovators coming up. There's self-driving cars from Baidu. There's drone makers such as DJI from southern China. These photos are from the equivalent of a consumer electronics show in China. DD, of course, everybody knows the ride-hailing service. Xiaomi, the smartphone maker. JDI, Cheetah Mobile. These are all Chinese brands that are emerging. Now, as a journalist, I'm covering what I call the tech triangle, which is China, Israel, and the US. And as you can see here, there are a number of reasons why this tech triangle exists. And I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. But I think it is really tough for newcomers to get into the China market. If you look at what happened to Uber as an example, they really were swallowed up by their China equivalent. But another interesting thing is that how China has become an important source of capital for Israeli funds. And this is a trend, I think, that is ongoing as well and increasing. I put up this chart because it gives you some perspective on where China, US, and Israel are in relation to one another and where it is globally. And you can see the increases over the years. And you can see China's gone from 3.5 billion to 32 billion. It's amazing growth. Israel, of course, is growing nicely as well, but from a much smaller base. So I talked a little bit, I just mentioned briefly the China to Israel fundraising flows. These are a number of the funds that have had capital from China. And as you can see, it's Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, Lenovo, who are driving a lot of this. Deals in Israel with China participation on the upswing as well. $15.5 billion invest in Israel-China private equity transactions in recent years. But another interesting tidbit I noticed was Israeli VCs placed only 13% of investment in Israeli high tech in 2016. So it really is an international story of what's happening here in Israel. The China to Israel tech deals. Here's some examples of China companies investing in leading Israeli tech. We have two of these companies represented here today. ever compliant, and UAPI. So I think that we'll be hearing from them a little bit later. The same trend, the same phenomenon has happened in the US. China buying into US tech startups, and also into Hollywood in a big way. So if you look here, you can see again the major China companies involved: Tencent, Renren, Baidu, Alibaba, Foshan, etc. Tencent, Alibaba, Lusha, Wanda in Hollywood. And as an example of the tech triangle at work, the China, Israel, New York, Technion, and I think we have some people here from Technion today, there is opening up campuses in New York City and in China's Guangdong province. So that's going to be, the New York City one is opening this summer, and the buildings are already coming along very nicely. And I think that that is going to really help to set New York City tech into a different league. Of course, we all know that all the major American tech companies are here in Israel already doing R&D. So are the China companies. And then, as another example of the tech triangle at work, Mobileye is going to be applying their technology on ride-sharing cars in New York City. So I'm looking forward to that because I live in New York, and there's too many accidents in New York City. As a sign of Silicon Dragon's activities in the tech triangle and beyond, we're going to be in several other markets this year, as you can see. The next one is in London, and then Hong Kong, Beijing, New York, etc. So if you're interested in any of this data, that's my email. We're on WeChat at Silicon Dragon and Twitter at Silicon Dragon, and a lot of this material is on our website too at Silicon Dragon Ventures. So thank you for listening.